right, we're back for this month's edition of our vlog and sharing information from the experts. Again, we have Scott Lewis with us. Scott Lewis, how long you been doing inspections now?
15 years.
15 years.
Yep. I have a background in construction management, so.
Okay, well, good. And you still enjoy doing inspections?
Oh, yeah.
I still enjoy it. I've been at it 31 years now. Just started back in August, rolled into the 31st year. Still enjoy doing inspections, sharing knowledge with our clients and our customers, and being able to help them in the home buying process. One of the things I wanted to talk about this month is phase inspections and why it's important to get a third-party inspection.
Phase inspections are really important. There's a lot of things that, as a homeowner or buyer, they don't see or know what's even going on in the building process. So that's why you would hire us to do, the phase inspections.
Yeah. So when we refer to phase inspections, we're talking still an inspection, but it's actually a new construction process.
Correct. Phase one is pre-pour. So before they pour the concrete, the reinforcements installed, the moisture barriers installed, everything, they're ready to pour. And that's when we do the phase one.
You do a phase one. Have you ever found a house that you never found any problems with whatsoever?
Never.
Okay,
Never.
so there's always findings.
Absolutely.
So why do you think it's important to hire a third-party inspector versus the builder's inspector or the city inspector?
Because we spend a lot more time looking at the same structure as a city inspector. The city inspector does 20 jobs a day. We do 2, so we can spend a lot more time there.
Yeah.
And we kind of know the codes a little better sometimes.
So we're able to spend more time at the house and do a more thorough inspection. I have found over the years good information that I had learned that even though the city sends out an inspector to do like code compliance for the city, that inspector is actually not even code certified. So they're just kind of trained to, by another individual within their department to go out and look at minimal things. They don't look at like final grades, and they don't actually, before they pour the concrete, actually go in and measure the beams and the footers to make sure they're wide enough and deep enough or per the engineered plans. They just kind of do a drive-by. Yes, it all, is put together, but they actually don't spend time on the site.
Right. We look at the plans and look at the reinforcement, make sure the reinforcement's installed properly. We actually count all the tension cables, installed, and make sure there's what's supposed to be there is there. Measure the depth of the concrete slab. Like you said, measure the beams, measure the width. Interior and exterior beams may be a little different according to the plan. So, we check all that.
So you do a really thorough inspection. So you actually use a tape measure.
Yep.
And you measure the former boards to make sure that they're level, because this is your only shot at getting it level.
Level, yeah.
Okay. So what's the worst foundation that you've measured being out of level from day one? I mean, the former boards before they pour the concrete.
3.5, 4 inches before.
Okay. So if they would have poured the concrete,
it would have been 4 inches.
Day one, it would have been.
So the problem with that is, let's say down the road they think they have foundation issues, and they hire a foundation company to come measure it. We talked about foundations last time. Then it says, oh, it's 4 inches off. Well, in reality, it really hasn't moved much. It's just because it was poured off.
Yeah, it was just poured wrong in the first place. So this is the opportunity to make sure, we check to make sure it's poured correctly. This is your only opportunity at zero.
Right.
Like zero changes in elevation, right?
And not only that, once it's poured, it's covered up.
Yeah.
Right. So you'd never know if there was an issue until the house was built and it moved, or, you had a catastrophic failure in the foundation or something, but it could have been caught early.
Yep. So hiring an unbiased third-party inspector, someone who's not connected to the builder, not connected to the city, someone has the consumer's best interests in mind, it's really worth the money to be able to make sure it gets done correctly.
Exactly.
Having, it's like getting a second opinion from a doctor, right?
Right.
You're making sure that you have someone else looking after you as well. Another thing about cities, municipalities, is a municipality, it's not until by state regulation, when the municipality doesn't have to have a code division in the city until the city reaches 5,000 or more. So you may be building within a city, but they actually don't even have a code compliance department.
The only times I've heard, oh, there's no building inspectors or no building inspection or code inspection on a home in the county or a small city.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, we often hear, well, we're out in the county, so there are no codes. Is that true?
There is codes, depending on the county or the city,
So
they
they
adopt the codes.
so they still have to be a code still has to be followed.
Absolutely. You can't just build a house out of toothpicks.
Yeah. So if there's not a code division or a code oversight, let's say it's a small city or out in a rural area, what code would be used?
Depending on what the city adopted at the time, they could adopt certain code years, and that would be whatever they adopted is what the code they have to follow.
So the state of Texas says the minimum code is the 2018. So if there's not a building compliant department, a city or some county, then the builder, who's not even regulated, still has to build it to a minimum of the 2018.
Correct.
And it's kind of funny because if you look at the building process, there's only 3 licensed disciplines that are involved in the building process. It's your plumbers by the plumbing board, and then your electricians through TDLR, and then the mechanical installation like HVAC. Those are the only 3 licensed disciplines on site. So just think about, you have unlicensed, unregulated people pouring your concrete, right? So there's no oversight. So
and maybe no inspection either.
No inspection, and if they do something wrong, there's no one to complain to.
Right.
Right. So the builder or the builder site foreman, there's no regulatory department for them. There's no oversight for them as well. If you and I wanted to be builders, we could just walk out the door and start marketing ourselves as builders.
Yeah.
And then you have, let's say, your roofers, no regulatory board for them. The framers, no regulatory board for them. So if we look at it, it's really a good idea to have a third party, looking after, your best interest, because there's a lot of unregulated people with every aspect of your home, building a home. So you're just, working off, you're hoping that the builder hired the most experienced people they can.
Right. Or they're going to check it themselves.
Yeah.
And no fault of the builder, but they're doing anywhere between 5 and 20 homes at a time. Again,
And so
don't
they
have much
can't be
time.
on every
Right.
site every day.
And they can't go, they don't have the time to check, is this done right? Or,
Yeah.
they're in and out.
With our particular company, we're fortunate because builders hire us as well.
Yeah, we do have builders that hire us.
So the builders who are really thinking about making sure it's getting done right will hire, quality control inspectors, that we do. We work with a lot of builders out in the rural county areas, because if there's no oversight, then they can't offer a warranty. And so even the builders, if the builders want to offer that 1 to, used to be 10, now it's 6 and 8. So 1 to 6 or 8, if they want to be able to offer that warranty, they have to have third party inspectors inspecting along the way. So we do work with a lot of good builders, but when we look at our licensed disciplines, so when someone mentions, hey, there's no code that we have to follow here. What about the licensed individuals, the plumbers, electricians, the HVAC?
Well, at the very least, you hope they're doing 2018 because Texas adopted it.
Correct.
But by their license, they have to follow the most current code out because they're licensed by the state.
They're licensed by the state. So the state says you have to use the most current code.
Correct.
So that's the reason why we always use the most current code, knowing that the electrical code comes out one year and the international residential code comes out the next year, and they're changing every 3 years, right?
Every 3 years.
Yeah. So
Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but
so that, it's funny because we'll have clients in our everyday inspections that, let's say the house is 10 years old, and they ask us, I want to make sure the house is meeting, current codes. And it's one of those conversations you have to have with them, that the house is already 10 years old, so it's not meeting current codes because the codes
Well,
change
what
every
about the
3
houses that are a
years.
year old and the code just changed? They're the same. They're not up to code either.
Yeah.
If the code just
Yeah.
changed a year ago.
Yeah, and so we kind of go back to on a third party inspections, making sure that everything is getting done correctly. And so, kind of on average, when you're doing like a pre pour before you pour the concrete, how long does it take you to do the inspection?
Dell depends on the size of the home, but at least 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and then you got to put the report together and send them the report. And so 2.5 hours, let's just say, on an average sized home.
So, what are you documenting during those 2.5 hours? Because obviously, it's not all about defects, is it? It's
No,
actually documenting what's there, and sometimes you're documenting the fact that it is done right,
correct.
right?
We hopefully the plan's on site and it's not rained on and ruined because sometimes they just leave it on the ground.
Yeah.
But documenting the thickness of the slab, the width and beam, whether it's inner or outer, the depth and the width of the beams, how many tension cables are there, is there rebar reinforcement required in the corners, or is it all rebar and no tension cables?
Yeah.
So
So it's important to be able to have the plans
very
available.
important for the plans. Yes.
Yeah, because it kind of goes back to a lot of people don't know is when it comes to like engineered plans, whatever the engineered plans say or the architectural drawings, those actually supersede any code,
Correct.
right? So
Yeah.
that's one of, you have codes as minimum building standards, but and then that way, if for whatever reason you don't have plans or engineered drawings, you default back to the most current code. But
Sometimes when you write it up as the most current code, it may not follow drawing, so it's wrong to us because we don't have the plans on site, although it may not be incorrect.
yeah, so it's again important to have the
Very.
plans because those plans are engineered and they'll have an engineer's stamp. So whatever the plans say, that's actually what needs to be followed that can supersede the code. And then kind of knowing what the codes are, we're here in North Texas, so we really see a lot of post-tension slab on ground foundations and post-tension cables. When you go to look at the code book actually doesn't regulate the installation post-tension cables. And so it says if you're going to use this type of foundation, then you have to follow engineered drawings and the installation guides by the Post-Tension Cable Institute, right? And and a lot of people are not certified to actually look at post-tension cables or probably never read the Post-Tension Institute's guidelines for post-tensioning. And so again, that would supersede codes because the post-tension cables aren't in,
Right.
by code. So you need to hire someone who really knows how to install or how post-tension cable should be
Should be
installed
installed.
and the rules and regulation. Because there's places like the post-tension acres, there's certain places they can be and there's certain places they shouldn't be because if they tension the cable, they can crush plumbing, they
Right.
could blow out corners and that type of stuff. So it's really important to have your eyes on it before they pour concrete and having somebody.
Extremely important.
Yeah. So what are some other findings that you find with, in phase one inspections?
Well, people don't realize that moisture barrier is very important. And when they put the moisture barrier around the plumbing stacks, if they don't tape it or rips in the moisture barrier, I did a house one time and there was no moisture barrier at all. And it was because they were having stained concrete and the moisture barrier would crack it.
Correct.
But if they wanted to put carpet or hardwood floor down, they would have, buckled their floors.
Yeah, it buckles the floor later. So yeah, it's important that the moisture barriers in the living spaces, and because the ground's real moist all the time and holds moisture all the time, and concrete's porous, so the moisture can pass directly through the concrete. So if you put down hardwood floors or something like that,
gonna buckle.
it starts ruining the hardwood floors later on. So, and that's even like around plumbing joints and that type of stuff. Your water lines that are going up through the slab and the and the waste pipes or the vent pipes, the risers that are going up to the slab, it's important that the vapor barrier be closed in and taped up around those as well, because that can ruin your floors in the bathroom or even the base of your cabinetry.
And then speaking of plumbing, make sure the plumbing depth is deep enough. Make sure the plumbing lines are protected, because you don't really want a slab leak. Especially if you find it out after the home's been built, and you have to jackhammer the floor and redo the flooring. And
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest defects that I find all the time is the water lines are not properly sealed or insulated from the concrete or protected away from the
Protected.
concrete. A lot of people don't think about it, but the earth is vibrating all the time, especially if you're near a main road or something like that. You built your house and it backs up to a 2-lane road behind. Just all the heavy traffic driving back and forth down that road vibrates the earth. And then when water's running through the plumbing lines, it's vibrating the plumbing lines. So if you don't properly protect it from the concrete, that is a future slab leak.
Well, and if it was bare ground at some point in time, that didn't have much the weight of the house on it or anything. Now all of a sudden you're putting a big structure, and it's in a neighborhood, so you're putting multiple, in the same virgin ground.
Right.
You can get a lot of compression or settling in the ground.
Yep. And then another big defect that we find often is getting the post-tension cables too close to a waste pipe that's going through the beam. So when they go to tension those cables, they put 32,000 foot-pounds of pressure on those cables when they go to
It's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure. And so if that post-tension cable, you have this round pipe and that post-tension cable is sitting right next to it across the bottom, and they tension that cable, it'll actually put a belly, not a belly, but it'll put indent the pipe, and stuff won't flow so well through it because of it. And so then you're going to constantly have backup problems.
And then again, you're in the same. If you want to fix it after it's poured, better jackhammer it all up, cut it out, and redo it.
Yeah, so it's really best to catch these things ahead of time.
Absolutely.
And what type of equipment do you use to measure the former boards and that?
So we
type
use a
of
zip
stuff?
level. So it's the same thing that an engineer would use to measure a home.
Okay.
On the levelness of a home. We use the same thing. It's called a zip level.
So it's just not a string line.
No, not a string line, not a transit, not a
Okay,
level.
so it's a professional piece of
Absolutely,
equipment.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
To make sure that we get as close to zero as possible. Other things that we find often is the cave-ins in the footers and the beams. And if you get dirt that falls into the footer of the beam, it's no longer as wide or as deep. What kind of problems can that create later?
Well, you're not getting your concrete in there, so it could cause cave-ins. And then the beam's not as deep, so
Okay.
it could cause failure.
Structural failure.
Structure failure, yeah.
Yeah, later on down the line. Yeah, I did one out in the county. I don't know, it was probably about a month ago. And I was actually working for the builder and went out and looked at the engineered drawings. And I'm sitting there staring at it going, am I even looking at the same project? And I turned it around and it was actually missing beams. Typically you'll see these 10 by 10 pads, and in some areas they may be larger, or if you're doing commercial work, they may not have the individual pads. But I'm looking at the drawing and it's like they're missing 4 beams, and it was an all rebar foundation. So they had all the rebar in. And he's like, well, what do we do? And I said, well, if you're going to follow the engineered drawings, you need to cut 4 more beams in. And he goes, well, what about all the rebar? And I said, you decide how you work
Yeah.
around them. But if you want me to give it a pass, then we need 4 more beams. Even on that same project, the reason why we want to look at the engineered drawings and look at the elevations of the house. And when I mean the elevations of the house, what type of material are they going to put on the exterior of the home? Because if they're going to put in a veneer siding or brick cladding, we need to have a veneer ledge
Brick
around it.
ledge. Yep.
Yeah, and then that ledge may need to be thicker, so we need to know, is it going to be like quarried stone? Because instead of a 2x4 there, we need a 2x6 now because stone's thicker.
Thicker.
And so I've walked up to projects and went, "There's no veneer ledges anywhere. What type of siding are you going to put on?" And then maybe no blockouts for porches or patios. Everything was just going to be flat. And one of the problems with everything just being completely flat is like on with a veneer ledge, if it's a flat and there's no veneer ledge, that means water intrusion. Every time it rains, it gets behind the brick and there's no ledge for it to kick it out to the outside. So it's just going to roll to
And
the
I've seen
inside.
issues with that as well before.
Yeah. And then, so using the engineered drawings really help because you want to look at a placement of where the plumbing's going to be. Let's say there's going to be an island in the house. How are you going to get electricity to the island?
We got to run that through the concrete beam as well,
Right.
through the
So,
foundation.
so one of the things you check for during phase inspections is making sure there's conduit added, to from the exterior wall to the island area, or houses with. So it's not all about the foundation. Let's say you have a pretty big house and you got this grand room, and you want to put floor outlets in. When do you place those?
Yeah, you have to place them before you pour the foundation,
Yep.
or you're jackhammering a little strip out to put them in.
And have you seen that?
Yes.
Yeah. So you go in and do a phase inspection later on, and I'd like to say a phase 2, which we'll discuss in a different vlog. But um, you go in, or like they jackhammered out the foundation for a long strip because they didn't put conduit in. So stuff like that can be caught ahead of
Ahead of
time
time.
before they pour the concrete.
And another important is, the contractors like to throw their garbage in the beams.
Yeah.
Or if it rains a lot, you get a lot of water. And, sometimes they'll pour the concrete without getting the water out. So at least we can tell them there's water in the beams and they should remove it,
Yeah.
before they pour the concrete.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think it's a big deal because, the concrete's wet and it's moving around, but it's actually engineered. The concrete
Right.
is engineered with how much moisture should be in it because the engineered drawings, your minimum PSI is 3,000 PSI. A lot of your engineered drawings say 3,200 PSI or even a 3,500 PSI. And if you add more water to the concrete, it actually changes the chemistry.
You make it not as strong.
Right. It makes it weaker.
Mhm.
And so even if the beams have water, moisture in them, and pouring the concrete into beams that are half full of water will change the chemistry of the concrete in that area, and it'll start spalling later.
And it won't
or
dry correctly or take too long to dry.
be-
And them, they want to get on there as fast as possible to start building. So,
Right.
if it doesn't cure properly, that could be a big issue.
Yes. Yeah. And then making sure the plumbing placements for the bathrooms. How many times have you walked into a bathroom and they jackhammered out a big line because the toilet was set in the wrong place?
Or the vent pipe goes up through the wall and they have to build the wall around it,
Yes. Yeah.
or the exterior cladding's pushed out a little bit because the way when they put the plumbing in wrong.
Yeah. So these are things again can be caught early. So hiring a company to come out and this is kind of the why behind it because a third party inspector is non-biased, so they're not doing minimum standards. They're using manufacturers' installation instructions. They're using the codes. And they're using the engineered drawings to make sure everything's done correctly. Like you mentioned earlier, that the engineered drawings will actually say where to place the post-tension cables, how many post-tension cables should be used front to back, and how many should be used side to side. How many inspections have you done where there's not enough post-tension cables in place?
Quite a few.
Yeah. So
Or they're not placed right.
or they're not placed correctly, or they don't have the right number of them.
Or believe it or not, they're
installed.
twisted.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
happens a lot.
so they should be fairly as straight as possible. If as long as they're not having to travel around a block out or a plumbing. But like you said, they shouldn't be twisted together. The engineered drawings clearly show them over and under or side to side.
Absolutely.
And how many per beam. So those are things that it's important to look at and make sure that they're done correctly. But also using a third party like us, we document certain things. So what things do we document that would be helpful to the client?
Again, all the, beam width, beam depth, slab, how many how many tension cables are there and all that kind of stuff, how deep the plumbing is, how deep the, main
And that's all
drain
placed in the report.
in
So
the report.
so it's all verifiable later on. And so you take extra photos, put them in a photo summary. So not everything in the report is like it's wrong, but it's
Right.
also this is done right. So you have kind of a you you know what's that term I'm looking for? Makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah, to know that things were actually done correctly, and work that particular angle, but also to be able to go, hey, 5 years from now, if I'm having an area where I feel like, hey, for whatever reason, I think there's something going on in this area, you can actually go to the report because it's documenting with photo journal of what the site looked like before they poured the concrete. So it could be one of those tools that you could help troubleshoot what might be wrong in that area.
Yeah. You can use the photos. Well, I think we may have a slab leak. Well, is there plumbing in that area? Well, our photos, normally you'll see it in our photo summary.
So you could verify if there's plumbing in that area, or if there's not plumbing, it's not a slab
Right.
leak. It's possibly something else that's affecting it in this area.
It's 1034.
Okay, and so this is lots of really good information to share. Why we should have a third party. And I think our next episode we'll talk about phase two inspections. So the different type of phases. So today we talked a lot about phase one and why it's important. We talked a little bit about who's licensed and who's not licensed, and then what standards to use. So on the and then pretty much in my 30 years of doing phase inspections as well, I haven't found like the perfect slab that I've ever walked up on and said it's completely okay. I didn't find any defects at all. So I found defects at every single one, even after I seen the green tag.
Yeah.
It had defects. So so on the next episode, I think it'll be important for us to talk about phase two. So so when we're looking at phase inspections, we have what's called the pre-pour, phase one. And then when we have phase two is pre-drywall. And so before they hang insulation, before they hang drywall, we go in and look at literally every stud. See, a city inspector doesn't do that.
No.
Look at every stud, look at the rough end electrical, rough end plumbing, and we'll talk about that type of stuff in the final episode or in the next episode. And then we have final inspections as well. And a lot of people kind of hold off on not getting the final inspection because they're like, well, I'm going to get a 1 year warranty. I can't tell you how many final inspections I walked into and outlets didn't work. Light fixtures,
light fixture didn't work.
air conditioner not hooked up yet.
I had plumbing not separated in the ceiling and pouring downstairs when I was upstairs.
Yeah. So we'll talk in one of our future episodes. We'll talk about why it's important to have final inspections done. And so Scott, thanks for being here
Well,
and
thank you.
sharing your knowledge once again. And if this information helped you, please share it with others. Or if you know of anybody it might help, please share it with them as well. And then we'll check in again with you next month.